Democratic congressman from Texas, Congressman Henry Cuellar. Congressman, obviously you represent a border district. It includes border towns as well as part of San Antonio. How are you preparing for Thursday's deadlines? And what are your expectations? Is your area prepared to contend with the wave of migrants that we expect?
You know, every border is different. Laredo is the second lowest crossing in the whole United States. So we basically just take the overflows from the valley and from other places up here. But keep in mind that, you know, in looking at the numbers, I've looked at the numbers that are in the shelters or surrounding shelters on the northern Mexican states, which are right next to the U.S. border. And there's over 150,000 people that we know of. And then if you include the ones that are in the interior, southern Mexico, and then you count the ones that we know of in places like Guatemala and the other places, you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that are going to be ready to come over. The latest numbers are about 8,700 people a day. That, of course, will probably go up. You know, my question is, are we going to be ready for this? I think the administration has some policies, new policies. The only thing is, I think they will be effective. The only thing is, I think they implemented them a little bit too late, in my opinion.
All right, let's talk more about this because you tweeted that you're prepared to work with DHS and the Border Patrol in order to keep your district safe. And we saw the Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas say he's been in Texas since Thursday. Have you personally spoke with the secretary or anybody else in the administration and expressed your concerns about this delayed implementation and other suggestions you would have to make this process smoother?
Yes, absolutely. I have. And I've talked to the secretary many times. As you know, I'm the ranking Democrat on Homeland Appropriations. So I've had an opportunity to talk to him, talk to the other folks there. And look, you know, we've added in the last 2 years, you know, from the Trump administration, we've added $2.4 billion to CBP. That's a 15% increase to the budget. So money's important, but it's not only that. You got to have the right policies. And I'll say this. Words are one thing, but if you don't show actions, and by actions, I'm talking about deporting people back to the countries because they're not supposed to be here, they're going to continue coming. Otherwise, they see the border as a speed bump and they'll continue coming. So again, you know, I know sometimes folks say, well, the immigration is broken, the system is broken, Congress needs to do its job. Keep in mind that actually the lowest crossings were not under Trump. They were actually under Obama. And Obama used Title 8 instead of Title 42. And he did expedited proceedings, which means he removed the ones that were not supposed to be here. And he actually showed people going back. When was the last time he showed people coming back or being sent back? All we see is videos of people coming in. And those images are powerful messages that people in other places might not understand what Title 42 is, but they see the powerful images of people coming in, and therefore they're going to continue coming unless we have repercussions at the border.
And the president and his administration have now sent, troops to the border to try and help with the situation there. Do you think that's theater, or do you actually think it could help the situation?
Well, just like President Bush and Obama and Trump did, they sent the military out there. Keep in mind, they don't have any power to enforce immigration law. All they do is support work. That is, they will be able to free the Border Patrol agents so they can go out in the fields and do the work. And this military folks are not going to be patrolling the border, but they're going to be actually just doing support work so Border Patrol can do its work.
All right, let's talk about some of the possible policy prescriptions on Capitol Hill. We know that Senator Tillis and Sinema on the Senate side are actually working on a piece of legislation that would essentially allow the provisions of Title 42 to continue on. It wouldn't be Title 42. It would be essentially a new law. Is that something that you'd be supportive of? Do you think that that's appropriate, that something like Title 42 remain in place?
Well, I haven't seen that, but I can tell you of another proposal that Senator John Cornyn, Tony Gonzalez, and a couple of us have been working on that basically uses Title 8, which is the law right now. Title 8 is actually more powerful than Title 42 because on Title 42, you expel somebody, but they can come back. Under Title 8, you actually have some teeth, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years bans where they can't come back again. The way President Obama and Secretary Jay Johnston use Title 8 expedited removals will work. And the bottom line is you got to have those immigration judges, asylum officers at the border where they can make some quick decisions. Somebody stays, somebody goes. Because otherwise, like Mr. Venegas said in your story a few minutes ago, you're going to have people from all over the place. And I've seen it's a mini UN down there. Yes, you have Venezuelans. Yes, you have Cubans. Yes, you have Central Americans. But you got people, look at some of the numbers in Arizona and San Diego. You got people from Turkey as the number 1, a number 3 spot. India from there. And again, you got them from all over the place, including the country of Georgia, not the state, but the country of Georgia, as your report just came out.
Wow. All right, let's move on and talk about how your state has just been rocked by a series of tragedies over the weekend. First, the devastating shooting that took place there. We also had the vehicle incident where 8 people believed to be migrants were hit by a car. We still don't have a motive yet, but can you talk to me a little bit about what the atmosphere in Texas is like right now? Are these isolated incidents? Is there a broader problem in your state right now?
Well, again, if you talk about mass shootings, we've seen that in different areas, including states like California and other states. Washington, D.C. is about 3 or 4 times more dangerous than Laredo, Texas, my hometown. When you talk about murder, rape, assaults, you look at the states that have very strict handguns, they still have mass shootings. But again, I look at it as a complex, multifaceted factors. There are several factors. There's not one factor that causes, the problems. It goes from mental health, access to guns, social isolation, extreme ideology, like I think we might have in Allen. Sometimes it's drugs, like the person in Bronxville. I think reports will show that he was on heavy drugs. We don't know his motive, but I don't think he was on alcohol, but he was certainly on drugs. So we're seeing different factors. So the solution is not one or the other one. It's more of a multifaceted approach that we need to address.
Well, let's talk about one possible solution, and it would specifically apply to the shooter in this incident because we've now discovered a lot of hateful online content, and he seemed to hold pretty extreme beliefs. You've supported red flag laws in the past. Should there be background checks for gun ownership, and should they include checks on people's social media?
Well, I certainly support background checks, and I support red flags, raising the age of 21. Of course, this person was higher than 21, but the Uvalde shooter was not. I would say, and I've supported a lot of pieces of the legislation, including the bipartisan gun bill that we passed. I supported that. But again, one of the things that we need to look at, and I know there's a First Amendment right there. But if you look at almost every case, there's always some sort of telltale sign out there. They speak about it, they write about it, they'll post about it. There's always something out there, and we just got to do a better job in following those particular signs. Almost every case, there was something there that they posted or they said something in the past.
All right, Congressman Henry Cuellar, obviously this is a very busy time for you and your state. We appreciate you delving into many of these important issues. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.